The three words I would use to describe yoga actually describe the state of yoga rather than the physical practices. They are self-empowerment, meaning being empowered by the internal source of the self. Independent, meaning independence, dependent on the internal source of being. And self-confidence, knowing exactly who you are. So the three words that most describe the state of yoga: self-confidence, independence, and self-empowerment. I do call myself a yogi. When I was very young and first started the practice, I had immersed myself in the mythology of Hinduism, and I remember speaking to one of my first teachers, and we were talking about the state of the world and the fact that all of these different religions were at war, and I was very young and I proudly put my hand on my hip and said, "I'm a Hindu." And I didn't know at the time that you actually have to be born into the religion. And he looked at me and he shook his head and he said, "Why would you identify with any religion at all? They're all at war or fighting with each other. Why not just be a yogi?" And in that moment, it's like my whole spirit exhaled and I was released from the confines of any specific form of doctrine or dogma. And I was free to explore my internal world through the practices of yoga. So yeah, I think I'm a yogi. I started the yoga practice quite young, and I think that I would be astonished if I knew what I would have done with my life back then. So if I could meet my younger self, I would probably just put my hand on my young shoulder and say, "Just wait. You have no idea how good life is gonna get." I wrote a book last year about mantra, and I love the practice of mantra. It is one of the yoga practices actually that is 5,000 years old. Mantra is a tool to help bridge the mind, move across the ego, and loosen the grip of the ego. I have a huge list of mantras that I love, but interestingly, the mantra that I repeat most often to myself during the day is, "This is what's happening now." It's a way for me to stay present and in the present moment so that no matter what is going on, I recognize this is what's happening now. And it allows me to be awesomely okay with everything. That whatever is happening now is a part of my yoga practice and allows me to walk the talk. I keep my teaching skills sharp by consistently teaching. Teaching is twice learned. So when you teach something, you have to successfully convey it to someone else. So it allows you to run whatever it is you're teaching about through your system as you put it out there. Every time I teach about the Yoga Sutra, I become more confident in what the Yoga Sutra means for me. Every time I teach about the Bhagavad Gita, I become more confident in how the Bhagavad Gita operates in my life. Every time I teach about the power of vinyasa or the power of sacred sound, it infuses my own cellular structure with the importance of those practices. So I stay sharp on my teaching by never stopping being a teacher. Yoga makes me a better person essentially by kind of cutting the wheat from the chaff. Through the presence of mind that is cultivated through yoga practices, not just asana, but meditation, mantra, mindfulness practice, karma yoga, simply being kind to others, everything that encompasses a wide yoga practice, you start to see through your own bullshit. You start to pull yourself away from believing your thoughts all the time. It allows you to be driven not by pleasure-seeking or approval-seeking, but by connection. You're deeply entrenched and immersed in the self, and the way that that feels is incredible. Once you've attained it, you never want to let it go. So you stay diligent in the yoga practice, and you consistently do things that make you feel self-empowered, independent, and self-confident. I have noticed over the many years that I've been practicing that I'm calmer, I'm happier, I'm more at ease with my body, with my life, with the things that go wrong. Yoga doesn't make your life easier, it makes you better at living your life. So that kind of ease in the everyday structure means that even when life isn't sparkles, rainbows, and butterflies, you're still awesomely okay with whatever's happening. I think the yoga community could do a lot better. And I know that that is a challenging thing to say as a yoga teacher who works in the yoga community, but what I am witnessing right now is a loss of yoga, actually. And something that I've been saying quite often is that yoga is broken. The way that we do it here in the West often misses the point. We're focused on the physical practice, the physical feeling of the practice, the beauty of the practice. We're focused on garnering likes for the images that we post of the practice, rather than immersing ourselves not just in the practice, but the actual experience of yoga. So out there, yoga seems to be, in the words of T.S. Eliot, a heap of broken images, that we're grasping and reaching for these different shards of what yoga once was, when yoga can always be found on the inside. But that means taking a good, hard look in there, and sometimes that's not the most popular way to go. My hope for the yoga community is that we become more brave, we stand on our own 2 feet, and we start to represent the yoga, the state of yoga, the state where we feel self-confidence, independent, and self-empowered. And we offer students a feeling of what that experience is like, rather than just the power to stand on your hands. The biggest benefit of yoga is yoga. It's the state of yoga. Yoga, interestingly, is both a noun and a verb. Yoga describes both the practices of yoga as well as the state. Ideally, what we're looking to do are practices that allow for the condition of yoga to arise. Yoga is your natural state. It is who you are. It's a sense of being at ease and comfortable. It's a sense of getting better at living life. You're awesomely okay with everything in yoga. So the common mistake is doing the practice for the physical benefit rather than doing the practice for the metaphysical benefit. When I first started practicing yoga, I fell asleep in savasana all the time. I was an overworked, underpaid young college student, and I lived for my weekly yoga practice. And by the time I got there, I was so overly exhausted that the only way my brain could cope with lying still was just shutting off. It took a while to work through that and to stay present in shavasana rather than just falling asleep. So if that's happening to you, don't worry, it will pass. The most unusual place I've ever done my practice would definitely be in a cave in India. I've been to India a few times, and if you are a dedicated yoga practitioner, eventually you will have to go to India to really understand the root of this practice and where it comes from and how it's been translated to the West. So I remember sitting in this cave, and it was Vashista's cave. It's rumored to be Vashista's cave, and Vashista is a great yogic sage who we have a pose named after, Vashistasana. And I had written about Vashista and his story and his pose in my book, Myths of the Asanas, actually before I went and sat in this cave. So it was very surreal to be there as an American Western female yogi in the depths of this very dark cave, thinking that I already had this strange connection to this legendary sage in whose cave I was sitting. And having that connection already made my meditation in that particular cave at that time incredibly profound. And I was also cognizant of the fact that this isn't necessarily the normal meditation location for Western yogi, so I was very grateful to be there. The thing that I love about Yoga Download is that it makes yoga accessible to everyone, everywhere. In my early yoga career, I had an experience of isolation. I was the only teacher who taught the style of yoga that I did in the state that I lived in for 2 straight years. So I had no one around me to inspire me, no one to support me, no one to teach me further or offer me feedback. And at that time, I wished somebody had done this for me. I wished there had been a resource that I could go to access the teachings and the teachers that would have inspired me. So that experience prompted me to start doing online education because it was a way for me to reach people who would not normally have access to teachings like this. So I'm so grateful for Yoga Download for giving students everywhere a way to have really solid yoga education. Home practice is different from studio practice because it takes marked self-discipline to do it. You have to want the yoga to get on your mat because it's so much easier to do everything else. Getting yourself to a studio is hard as well, but once you're there, and you have to go through with it. And being in a studio environment means that you're practicing around a whole bunch of people, and oftentimes that group energy, it really elevates you and moves you through whatever stuckness is happening in your poses. But when you're at home alone, there's no one else there to help. It's really you and you on your mat. And that personal confrontation can often be really challenging, but it's also the most worth it. Home practice is where it's at. So I strongly encourage you to give it a try.